My fiancé texted, working all weekend on a huge deadline, can't be disturbed. I replied, I understand, good luck. Then her boss emailed me, asking if she was okay since she'd requested the weekend off for a family funeral. When I sent him the live photos her friend just tagged her in, from a pool party. I'm still not entirely sure what possessed me to post this. Maybe it's closure. Maybe it's a warning to others. Maybe it's just that telling internet strangers about the most embarrassing moment of your life is somehow easier than telling your friends. For context, I, 32M, was engaged to Natalie, 30F, for just over a year, about 14 months to be exact. We'd been together for 4 years total. Met in grad school, moved in together after graduation, got engaged last spring. Standard relationship progression. No major red flags, or at least none that I recognized at the time. Natalie worked in marketing for a medium-sized tech company. Her boss, David, is about 45, married with kids, and by all accounts a decent guy who runs a tight ship. I'd met him a few times at company events, and he always seemed professional, if a bit intense. Natalie occasionally complained about his micromanaging, but generally spoke highly of him. We'd corresponded once when I helped coordinate a surprise birthday lunch for Natalie at her office, and she had listed me as her emergency contact when she joined the company, so he had my contact information. I'm in healthcare administration. My schedule is pretty predictable. Weekends off, unless there's an emergency. Natalie's schedule was more variable. She'd sometimes work weekends when they had big campaigns launching or important clients visiting. So when she texted me on a Friday afternoon saying she'd be working all weekend on a major deadline and can't be disturbed, I didn't think much of it. It had happened before. I replied with a supportive, I understand, good luck, love you, and started planning a solo weekend. Maybe catch up on some reading, watch that documentary series she hated, order from the Thai place that makes her nose run. Standard supportive partner stuff, right? Saturday morning, I was enjoying my coffee and finally getting around to that book I'd been meaning to read when an email notification popped up on my laptop. It was from David, Natalie's boss. The subject line, concerned about Natalie. I opened it immediately, heart racing. Had something happened at work? Was there an accident? The email was polite but perplexing. Hi Mark, I hope this email finds you well. I'm reaching out because I'm a bit concerned about Natalie. She requested this weekend off several weeks ago for what she described as a family funeral out of state. However, I've just been notified that we need to make some urgent changes to the Henderson campaign by Monday, and I haven't been able to reach her on her cell. I know this is an insensitive time to be bothering her, but the client is insisting on these changes. Before I try reaching out through other channels, I wanted to check with you to make sure everything is okay with her and her family. Please let her know she can take all the time she needs for the funeral, but if she could just give me a quick call regarding the Henderson materials, I would greatly appreciate it. My condolences to you both during this difficult time. Best regards, David Reynolds. I read the email 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Family funeral? No one in either of our families had died. I would certainly know if someone in my family had died. And if someone in her family had died, why wouldn't she tell me? My confusion quickly turned to suspicion. Why would Natalie lie to her boss about a funeral, then tell me she was working all weekend? I called her cell, straight to voicemail. I texted, hey, everything okay? Your boss just emailed me looking for you. No response. With growing unease, I opened Instagram. While Natalie and I didn't obsessively monitor each other's social feeds, we were connected to most of the same people. I followed Tira because she'd organized Natalie's birthday party last year, and her public Instagram was a mix of party photos and amateur photography. I didn't have to scroll far before I found something. Tira had posted several Instagram stories that morning, and there, in a series of posts from what appeared to be some kind of pool party, was Natalie, laughing, drinking something bright blue out of a plastic cup, wearing a swimsuit I'd never seen before. Tagged location, Lake Havasu, Arizona. We live in Pittsburgh. There were multiple posts spanning from Friday night through Saturday morning, enough to establish a clear timeline that directly contradicted both stories she'd told. She wasn't working. She wasn't at a funeral. She was partying at Lake Havasu, over 2,000 miles away by road. I sat there, coffee growing cold, as the reality of the situation sank in. My fiancée had lied to both me and her boss about where she was and what she was doing. The question was, why? I scrolled through more of the posts, looking for clues. Most were typical party pics, groups of people I didn't recognize, drinks, poses by the pool. But then I saw something that made my stomach drop. Natalie with her arm around a guy, tall, tan, athletic looking, his hand resting a little too comfortably on her waist, both beaming at the camera. The caption, "The crew for the weekend. #lake life, no responsibilities." Among the tagged people was the guy, at Matt Davis LV. His profile was public, personal trainer from Las Vegas. Posted a lot of workout videos and motivational quotes. And as I discovered from scrolling through his recent posts, he'd been interacting with Natalie's social media for at least 2 months. Little comments, likes on photos I hadn't even seen because they'd been shared to close friends, a list I was apparently not on. I'm not proud of my next move, but I was reeling. I took screenshots of everything. The email from David, Natalie's text saying she was working, Kira's posts showing Natalie at the lake, the tagged photos with Matt. I briefly considered whether sending her boss evidence of her personal activities was crossing a line, but given that she had lied about a family death, which has serious professional ethics implications, I felt her employer had a right to know. I compiled it all into an email and, after hesitating for about 30 seconds, sent it to David with a brief note. David, thank you for your concern. As you can see from the attached screenshots, there is no family funeral. Natalie appears to be at Lake Havasu this weekend. I was told she was working. I'm as surprised as you are by this information. I understand you have a business to run, so I thought you should know the truth. Regards, Mark. I then turned off my phone, closed my laptop, and went for a long walk to clear my head. When I returned 3 hours later, I had a flurry of missed calls and messages from Natalie, Kira, and even Matt, who likely got my number from Natalie's phone when she was panicking about the situation. I chose not to respond to any of them immediately, partly because I was too hurt and angry to trust myself to communicate clearly, and partly because I needed time to process what had happened. When I finally checked my email, David had responded. Mark, I genuinely appreciate you bringing this to my attention. Uncomfortable as it must have been, this puts me in a difficult position professionally, as I'm sure you can understand. I'll be addressing this with Natalie directly when she returns to the office. On a personal note, I'm sorry you're going through this. My wife left me for her work friend 10 years ago, so I understand the shock and betrayal. Take care of yourself. David. I later learned David was at his son's soccer game when my email came through, and the situation concerned him enough to warrant an immediate reply, despite it being a Saturday. His note struck me as unusually personal for a professional communication, but I later learned he'd been advocating for better work-life balance policies at the company, based on his own experience. His transparency about personal matters was part of his management philosophy. That email, oddly enough, was what finally made me break down. The simple humanity of it, the acknowledgement that this wasn't just a professional issue but a personal devastation. I sat on my couch and cried for the first time since my dad died. When I finally checked my phone, there were 27 missed calls and over 40 text messages. The gist of them, from Natalie, increasingly panicked messages starting with, "Why did you email my boss?" and escalating to, "You've ruined my career," and finally, "Please just talk to me, I can explain everything." From Kira, initially hostile, "Why are you stalking my Insta and sending shit to Nat's boss? Psycho much?" Then backpedaling, "Look, I didn't know she told you she was working, that's between you guys." From Matt, a single message saying, "Hey man, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Natalie said you guys were on a break." On a break? That was news to me. The classic line, straight out of a 90s sitcom. I almost laughed. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I texted my brother and asked if I could crash at his place for a few days. I needed space to think, and I didn't want to be home when Natalie eventually returned. My brother, being the solid guy he is, immediately said yes. I packed a bag, made sure our cat had enough food and water for a couple of days, and headed over. The full story emerged over the next week, pieced together from confrontations, confessions, and conversations with mutual friends. Natalie had been unhappy for months but didn't know how to tell me. Translation: she wanted to explore other options while keeping me as a safety net. She'd met Matt during a bachelorette weekend in Vegas 3 months ago, back in April, and they'd stayed in touch. This wasn't their first weekend together, just the first time they'd been careless enough to get caught. The lies were elaborate. She'd told me she was working so I wouldn't expect contact. She'd told her boss there was a funeral so the company wouldn't expect work. She'd created the perfect alibi, or so she thought, to have a consequence-free weekend with Vegas Matt. What she hadn't counted on was David needing something urgent from her, or Kira's incessant need to document every moment of her life on social media. After staying at my brother's for 4 days, we had a series of difficult conversations about our relationship and living situation. Our conversations evolved over several difficult days. Her initial fury about her job gave way to defensive blame-shifting, then tearful apologies, and finally a cold admission that she wasn't ready for marriage. Each phase felt like peeling back another layer of deception. Over the next 10 days, we worked out the logistics, contacted the landlord about lease options, and I began looking for a new place. The lease was in both our names with 8 months remaining, so we agreed that she would stay, and I would continue to pay my half until we could find someone to take over my portion. After consulting with a lawyer friend, I insisted on a written agreement about the temporary payment arrangement and a formal plan to remove my name from the lease within 60 days. I wasn't going to risk being legally responsible for an apartment I no longer lived in any longer than necessary. 2 weeks after the initial discovery, I was moving my essentials to a temporary sublet while searching for something permanent. The engagement ring, which had belonged to my grandmother, was returned without argument. Fortunately, Pennsylvania law considers engagement rings to be conditional gifts contingent on marriage, so the return of my grandmother's ring wasn't just a moral expectation, but a legal obligation. That spared us at least one potential fight. In the months that followed, I learned a lot about myself and the relationship. Looking back, there had been signs, small inconsistencies in stories, weekend work emergencies that never seemed to produce any visible results, a growing distance that I'd attributed to pre-wedding stress. I'd rationalized them away. I trusted her because I wanted to trust her, filtering out the evidence that suggested I shouldn't. But the truth is, I missed it because I wasn't looking for it. I trusted her completely, and that, perhaps, was my only mistake. As for Natalie, she and Matt dated officially for about 3 months before he moved on to someone else. She moved to Chicago last winter for a fresh start. We haven't spoken since the day I moved out. What started as an awkward situation with David evolved naturally over time. About a month after everything happened, he reached out to see how I was doing. We met for coffee, initially just to clear the air, but found we had similar views on everything from healthcare policy to craft beer. The friendship developed organically from there, though we had an unspoken agreement not to discuss Natalie unless necessary. About 3 months after everything happened, David sent me a job posting at his brother's consulting firm. I wasn't ready to leave my position at that point and declined to apply. However, when another, more suitable position opened up, 9 months later, 6 months ago from now, he reached out again. I've gotten to know David beyond our awkward initial connection, and we grab a beer occasionally and talk about everything except Natalie. Kira still gives me dirty looks when we run into each other around town, as if I'm the villain in this story. I find it more amusing than aggravating these days. It's been just over a year now. The Lake Havasu incident happened in July 2022, I moved out in early August 2022, and it's now September 2023, and I'm doing better than I expected. Dating again? Cautiously. Adopted a second cat? Reconnected with old friends I'd neglected? The usual post-breakup growth narrative. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal, though that was certainly painful. It was the realization that someone I thought I knew completely, someone I was planning to spend my life with, was capable of such elaborate deception. Not just a momentary lapse of judgment, but a sustained campaign of lies told to multiple people across multiple days. It makes you question your judgment, your perception, everything. If I could be so wrong about Natalie, what else am I wrong about? But time helps, and therapy, and friends who let you rant over beers. And eventually, you start to trust again, not just others, but yourself. So if there's a moral to this story, I guess it's this. Pay attention to the small inconsistencies. Trust your gut when something feels off. And for God's sake, if you're going to lie about your whereabouts, make sure your friends aren't tagging you in pool party photos. Edit. Since people keep asking, yes, I considered the possibility that there was a reasonable explanation before I sent the email to her boss. But the combination of 1, the lie about a family funeral, 2, the lie about working all weekend, 3, the photos with a guy she'd never mentioned, and 4, her completely ignoring my text asking if everything was okay, it painted a pretty clear picture. Could I have waited until she returned to confront her? Sure. Would it have changed anything fundamental about the situation? No. Edit 2. To clarify about the Henderson campaign mentioned in David's email, it was legitimate. That part wasn't made up to test her or catch her in a lie. David really did need her input on something, which is why he reached out to me. Edit 3. A lot of comments are focusing on whether I should have contacted her boss. I understand the criticism, but consider this. She had used a fake family death as her excuse. In a professional context, that's not just a small lie. It's manipulative and puts her boss in an awful position. How could he question someone about a family funeral without looking like a heartless monster? She weaponized compassion to avoid work responsibilities while partying. I wrestled with whether contacting her boss crossed a professional line. However, falsifying a family death for time off is generally considered serious misconduct in most workplaces. David had been misled about something significant that affected his business operations, and he'd reached out to me first based on that deception. Under those specific circumstances, I felt providing him with the actual facts was justified. Edit 4. For those wondering about Matt's "we were on a break" text, I later found out from a mutual friend that Natalie had indeed told him we were having problems and taking space to figure things out. This was news to me. We had normal relationship ups and downs, but there was never any discussion of a break or separation, just another lie in a growing collection. Update. 1 year later. Life has a funny way of working out sometimes. Remember David, Natalie's boss who emailed me that fateful Saturday? He kept his word about that job at his brother's consulting firm. When a position opened up 6 months ago that perfectly matched my experience, he sent it my way again. This time, I was ready for a change and applied. I got the job, and it came with a substantial pay increase and better work-life balance. In an ironic twist, I learned during the interview process that Natalie had applied for a position at the same company a few months earlier and had been rejected. Apparently, her reference check with David hadn't gone well. Actions and consequences. As for my personal life, I'm seeing someone new. It's still early days, but promising. She's a pediatric occupational therapist who's refreshingly straightforward about everything. When she says she's working, she's actually working. When she needs space, she says so directly. It's amazing how attractive simple honesty can be after you've experienced its opposite. The 2 cats are thriving. The apartment is peaceful. I'm planning a trip to Europe next spring, something Natalie always found reasons to postpone. Sometimes I think about sending David a gift basket or something to thank him for inadvertently saving me from marrying someone who could lie so effortlessly. But that might be weird. A beer next time we meet up will suffice. The lesson I've taken from all this is that sometimes what feels like the worst day of your life is actually the first day of a better one. You just can't see it yet through the tears. Final thought. Trust is rebuilt, one honest conversation at a time. It's been a long road back to believing what people tell me, but I'm getting there. And I'm much better now at recognizing the difference between genuine communication and convenient stories. Silver linings, I suppose.